Hello everyone and welcome to the first of probably many reviews of a film series I hold very close to my heart. And that film series is Hellraiser. Hellraiser is one of those films that everyone knows about but not many people have seen due to its sort of small release. And only recently have I managed to actually get a physical copy of the films. And now, after a long wait, I can finally bring you my review of Hellraiser. Hellraiser is a seminal horror film which was released in 1987 and was directed by the legendary horror and dark fantasy author Clive Barker. The film focuses on Julia, who is played by Claire Higgins. The story revolves around her and her new husband Larry, played by Andrew Robinson, who have come to London and have moved into Larry's late mother's house. The house contains the horrific skinless body of Larry's brother and former lover Frank, who is played by Sean Chapman, who has sold his soul to a band of sadistic demons who he has summoned by means of an antique puzzle box. Now, instantly the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of Hellraiser is how disgusting the film is. And I'm not talking just classic gore. This film goes above and beyond any type of gore I've seen in films for such a long time. And I'm sure you can probably tell that I wasn't around when the film originally came out. And even in the 2000s, even till now, I don't think I've seen many horror films that live up to Hellraiser in terms of gore. Honestly, this film is absolutely disgusting to the point where it even made me feel nauseous at some points, which, in all honesty, is very hard to do. I've seen many horror films, I've seen many gory films that aren't necessarily horror, and this film absolutely takes the cake. I think the performance that stole the show for me was that of Claire Higgins. She plays this evil stepmother in the film, which, for such a cliche character, has been done so well. Her acting in the film was really spectacular. I think, in terms of human characters in the film, she really carries the story. And that's because throughout the film, as the story progresses, you start to see more of a darker side, and how her murderous intentions become more of an obsession than just something that she has to do for Frank. And I think that sort of really reflects on society as a whole, because the film, despite being about demons and torture, focuses on very human traits such as addiction and lust. The film is undoubtedly very sexual, and I think that that has a lot to do with the idea that humans are willing to do anything that it takes for someone that they care about. This to me is a very bold take on horror, because in the 80s particularly, horror films were about, teenagers being killed endlessly in as many brutal ways as possible. And for a horror film to actually break new ground in terms of story dynamics and story arcs was a very huge leap of faith, especially back then, following the style of horror films and what the market liked. And I think that's why the film is so good, because it focuses more on a strong story with strong leads rather than adding shock value for the sake of adding shock value. And this is where I find the other horror films from the late 80s, early 90s fall short compared to Hellraiser. Because, for example, Friday the 13th is a classic horror film series, but it is repetitive. The same formula has been used in that film and many others for years now. And to me, Hellraiser is a breath of fresh air in the horror genre. This quite appropriately leads me on to talk about the Cenobites, who are some of the scariest antagonists I have seen in horror, period. The Cenobites are led by Pinhead, who is also known as the Priest of Hell. Pinhead was a soldier who also met the same fate as Frank after coming into contact with the puzzle box. He was transported to Hell and shown every pain and pleasure imaginable until they became indifferent. I think Pinhead stands out from the other Cenobites as he shows some sort of remorse and is more for reasoning and inflicting pain on those who deserve it more than others, as seen in the film. The other Cenobites are known as simply the female Cenobite, Butterball, and the Chatterer, with only the female Cenobite actually having some sort of dialogue, as the others remain completely silent. An advantage that the humans have in this film are that the Cenobites are unable to touch the puzzle cube, which is the portal back to hell. This means that the humans have a lot of power over the Cenobites, which you get to see during the final sequence of the film. And I think this is also another unique concept the Hellraiser has, where the enemy or antagonist in the film does not have such immense levels of power that they cannot be beaten. And Kirsty, played by Ashley Lawrence, really brings this full circle, because she comes into the film relatively late, and by the time she arrives, things have already started going wrong, and the Cenobites are beginning to show up. This is where my sort of main problem with the film lies, and that is her character seems a bit too logical about the situation. You know, these demons are now running around on Earth, and she seems to be trying to tackle the situation very logically. I think it's to do more with the fact that I don't really like her character. I mean, she is a vital part of the film, don't get me wrong, but I just don't think that her sort of character was appropriate for this type of film. She became more of like the final girl, and I think in a film that tried to stray away from that, it sort of takes away from the atmosphere of the film. But however, I still enjoyed it. And then we have Doug Bradley, who plays Pinhead. His performance is, one of the most flawless performances of a horror film villain that I've seen ever. He has it all. He has the expressionless face, the piercing eyes, and that demonic voice. And I also really love how he is one of the more vocal horror film villains. You have a lot of characters like Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, who don't speak, they don't have any lines in the films, apart from the odd groan or growl, And that's where Doug Bradley really shines. He delivers these quips in an almost comic fashion, which ironically adds to the tone and the atmosphere, making it really hellish and really, really menacing. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy the voiceless horror film antagonists such as Michael Myers. He doesn't need a voice in order to establish the atmosphere of the film. I think Halloween focuses more on the soundtrack. The soundtrack does more of the work and pulls more of the weight than Michael Myers does as a character in the film. The sound cues when he is near or when something is going to happen really make an impact on that film. But I noticed in Hellraiser there is, a lack of a loud soundtrack, and when the tension builds up, the sound effects that are not soundtrack related really shine through. Like the scene that's playing on the screen now has a lot of chains rattling and groans of pain, and on top of that, when Doug Bradley's character starts being cut open and having the pins hammered into his head, everything goes relatively quiet, and you can only hear his screams, which really adds to the atmosphere of the film. In conclusion, I'd go as far as to say that this is my favourite horror film of all time, and I believe it is so because it is such an obscure classic, and it focuses on such underused themes. And I don't think very many other horror film franchises have a universe that is as fleshed out as this, with all of its own lore, an extended universe which has been spawned from a book series which follows the films. And I also highly recommend the books. The books are very, very good and give a lot of insight into the film series. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this to the casual movie viewer. I'd say that I'd recommend you have a strong stomach before you watch this film. But with that said, if you want to take a dive into some more stomach-turning horror, then I highly recommend this film. I'm going to have to end it here because I can honestly spend all day talking about this film franchise. So with that said, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like rating down below and tell me your opinion on the film, and if you'd like to see me review the rest of the series. Don't forget to subscribe. and most importantly, stay dark.